Yeah. Cheesy bread.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about digital media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today, we're going to talk about loading in loading out, and answer your questions about that, and also just hopefully take some of the knowledge that we've had about doing this, some of the scars, and hopefully save you some of the trouble. So we'll talk about that in the second hour. But the first hour is open to your questions. So go ahead and throw those questions into Makana right now, and make sure to vote on those questions so that we know which ones you want us to answer first. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Robert, what do we have?
We start with Mike Edwards from Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. Alex, any update on the Atomos Zato Connect passing UVC controls with an Insta360 link?
No, no update yet. I ask Monday and I'll have it done. The week's been a little busy and it's right here. I have it. This is it. I want to test it, and I have to admit, those links sat in front of me for months, and then I moved them. I can't figure out where I put them. So I would love to have a better excuse, and I thought of trying to give you a better excuse, but the reality is I moved them, and they're not in where I keep cameras. I must have done something with them. I was in a rush to, I had to go down to LA last week, and I think that in the swirl of that, I put them somewhere where they didn't belong, and now I can't figure out where they are. They're all four of them are sitting together, but I'll find them over the weekend and test this little guy over the weekend. So ask on Monday, and we'll sort that out for you. Next question.
From Andy Korkendorfer, Vieira, Florida. He asks, I have long used hang 10 gesture to judge mouth to mic distance, right or wrong?
I think that we will take our favorite answer for all questions and say, it depends. so it depends on what kind of mic you're using. For a lot of mics, I guess mine is pretty close to that as far as that goes. Typically, what we do is we for SM58s, I usually tell people to just tap on your chin and then just move out about an inch. That's at an event, we want you to be about that close to make sure that it works. But go ahead, Courtney.
I guess it depends on how big your fingers are.
Exactly.
If you're a basketball player, that might be a little too far away. But yeah, 6 to 7 inches, that's a good measure. And like you said, dynamics, the PR40s, you want to get them, about a fist away.
Yeah, and a lot of times,
close the hand up for the PR40. Extend the fingers out for condenser.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to do more of, if someone's going to ask me, I tend to go more towards the fist than the hang 10, just because I feel like it. You will get a little more air if I move back here. You'll hear a little bit more that's out there, but you also hear a lot more of the room. So it also depends on what's going on in the room. Do you have speakers? Is it a hard room, soft room? Those are the things that will impact how close you want to get to that mic. Next question.
From Simon Ray, Midlands, United Kingdom. With low or no budget, what would the panel suggest to get a good key for Zoom when the participant has blue eyes and wears green Air Force uniform?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Olive drab, I don't think would be a problem with a green screen in the background. You can fine tune your clipping level on your greens to be fairly narrow and not extend out too much. The darker areas, you might get a little more fringing if you don't clean it up, or you might get a little transparency. But I think you should be able to create an acceptable green screen, not a perfect green screen. And I wouldn't worry about the blue eyes, because then, you'll just see through him and it'll look like he's possessed. So that's great for the blue eyes. Blue eyes won't be a problem then if you're using green.
Good, John.
I would say with little or no budget, don't do it at all.
Yeah. With little to no budget, I'd be very careful. Here's what the main thing that you want to look at is how clean is the green. So as you make your green screen more precise, you actually can even key greens that are very close to each other. When you think about that green screen, you want to really think about it being perfectly even across the side. So a lot of times, for instance, if you think about a LumaScope, that's here, we want that green to be at about 70% and just straight across like this. Now, it might bend down a little bit here and here, but the straighter this is across on a LumaScope, and the thinner this line is, that becomes a really, really tight target for your green screen solution. And that's going to make it a lot easier for you to key even green over green, which I've done. I've done green plants over top of a green, and it hasn't been a problem in the past. So it definitely can be done for that, but you really have to pay attention. Buying a chair mount or something that isn't very well lit is not going to work for you. It doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of money. I could probably go out and spend, I don't know, $50 to $100 and get a green that would work. And that would be buying, some kind of either Westcott or what are they called? Production Cowboy, one of those little stands with the green screen. And then I would go to Walmart. I've done this in the past. I go to Walmart and get just some two 4-foot lights that I can put back there and put some green gel across them. And all of that's going to cost you about $100. And then you're going to end up with a green screen that you could probably key everything out of. So that's, and then you just need a good keyer. I'm assuming you might try to use an ATEM or something like that. The software keyers aren't going to be as good as the Blackmagic hardware, but you might be able to get something that's okay. I mean, I've done it in software, but it was my own software and it was designed for that. so I haven't seen. We've offered to help other people with editing packages since I don't make that software anymore. I've offered to tell them how we did it, and they're all like, "Oh, we have our own way to do it." I'm like, "Okay, well, all right." Next question.
From Jack Rupel, Breckenridge, Colorado. Post-production of GoPro with Media Mod and first order recording on H3 VR. Use the Media Mod mic as a focus point for spatial audio. As camera moves, sound field follows camera. View ambisonic, spatial, binaural output. Thoughts?
Yeah, so the one challenge here is just what camera you're using and how much fan noise there is. So the problem we end up with a lot of these, especially because when you have a shotgun mic, it's designed to throw things away. When you have a ambisonic, it's designed to capture everything around you. So one of the things that you may have trouble with is really picking up I don't know if you'll have trouble with it. I know that I have had trouble with an ambisonic mic mounted to my camera because it picks up my camera fan. So think about that a little bit. You may want to extend it and move it away, from that. The other thing you want to look at is if there's anything that you want to actually capture that you might want to bring out. So you might want to mic on something specific. Some of the stuff we've been doing with ambisonic is we have an ambisonic mic, but we might have some SM58s that we're talking into, and then we can mix those forward and back based on what's necessary. Next question.
Mitchell Hill from Wilmington, Delaware is writing in, what is a good source for getting a QR code that goes directly to your website? Don't want it to use as an intermediate gateway.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Intermediate. Yeah, a lot of those web creator QR codes can take you through theirs to harvest clicks. But if you have Google Chrome, I guess this works on a Macintosh. Let's look. You open Chrome, you navigate to your website, then you just click on this little button here. And one of the choices is generate QR code. And it'll generate it. And then you click download. And it downloads it as a PNG, which you can open in another window or cut and paste and put into your, there it is, that's the PNG, and put into your program. So I think it's built into Chrome. I don't think I have a plugin installed that does that. I don't remember doing anything like that, but you can test it on your Macintoshes, all you Mac people out there, and see if it works.
Sorry, I was trying something. My computer did something funny there. So the one that I use right now is called QR Factory, and so it is it's for the Mac, and it is. I prefer not to use anything that. Well, there's a couple things. One of the things that's really good about the one of the things that's really useful. Sorry, my computer I was trying to open QR Factory and my computer went into a state that went to full screen. I can't see anything. So with QR Factory here, let's see if I can show it to you here. This is QR Factory here. So now what I can do is I can say, I want www. Let's see. We'll just go OH Factory. I don't know why I did that, but Doesn't matter. So now you have this here. Now there's a lot of this is text, or I guess I can set a URL, and I don't know. I'm actually not sure what that does there, but here's factory.com. All right, so it builds this up. And what's nice about this is that, of course, you can save it. When you hit save, you get options of PNGs, TIFFs, PDFs, EPSs, so you can build a resolution independent version of this that's out there. You also have you can go into customize here. And so, I mean, it's fine to be able to do there's a lot of things that can do a basic piece here, but I can also round all my pixels. So now they're all kind of have a more roundy look to them. I can decide, what the output size is. I can change my reliability level, which will make it more dense, but make it easier to read for a lot of these things. I can change the solids. I can also add, an icon in the center. So I can pop that into there. There's an icon border that can be created. So you have a lot more control here than you would have with just a kind of an automatic QR generation. Most of the web services that do QR codes will do at least what QR Factory does, but you can't trust them. so don't trust a web interface to do that. So they, a lot of times, they're building a code for it, and I've had situations where I built a code and then, it needs a subscription and it let you do it for free. And then it comes back 30 days later and says, hey, if you don't pay a subscription, your QR code will go to our website instead of yours. So I learned quickly not to use those. And so QR Factory, I think they have a version 2, and they are also a very responsive developer. So anyway, I would highly recommend if you have a Mac that you use QR Factory. Go ahead, John.
I just checked Courtney's method on Macintosh on the browser. It works fine. It's a save as button. It's the share button on the top right-hand corner of the browser in the text input of the browser box.
And does it save an EPS or ping or TIFF, or does it give you an option?
I'll tell you.
Yeah, it saves a PNG.
Okay.
I opened it and slid it over so you could see it. It's the little dotty kind, with the little dots instead of the blocky square thing. So it's a little higher resolution, I guess, required to shoot it.
Yeah, and again, that's why one of the reasons that I like stuff that'll give me an EPS or PDF option, just because then it's resolution independent as well. So that's the other thing there. Next question.
From here on the panel, Alexander Knight, Vancouver, British Columbia. With the ubiquity of streaming services, we're seeing a reduction of consumers making it out to the theaters. Movies seem to disappoint at the box office, but budgets have also ballooned to the point of unsustainability. Thoughts on where this is going?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I don't make films for a living, but as a consumer of films and someone who's interested in this stuff, I look at the numbers on these massive budgets for these movies and even television shows, and it just seems like the budgets keep going up and up and up, and we've got, $300 million movies, and there seems to be a distressing amount of money being spent even on these television shows, and it just seems unsustainable. There's an unbelievable amount of competition with streaming services now. And then you see these big movies getting released in theaters that are, according to critics, according to people watching these movies, they're good movies, but they're considered failures at the box office because they're not pulling in the numbers. If they don't do well within the first week or 2 weeks, they're considered failures, which I find upsetting. I'm sure it's upsetting to the people working on these films. And I just feel like there needs to be, why aren't the people making the content, why aren't they kind of roping it back? Because I feel like they could make compromises in certain ways and still make these shows and movies look cinematic and save a little bit of money. Why do we need to spend $300 million or $400 million on these? I don't know how much longer we can go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think your concerns are valid. So that there are some issues here that are becoming. The problem is very few people are going out to see movies that aren't big blockbusters. So if they're not, to get people to leave their house, and part of this has to do with, I think, the home technology. I have a relatively good home system, for instance. I've got surround sound. I've got a big screen. It's really hard to pry me out of my house. Like to go to a theater. I can spend $15 or $20 on Apple TV and download something that I can watch, with extras and all kinds of little extra bits and pieces. Or I can spend, for an average of $30 a person. If I'm going to get popcorn or any kind of drink or anything else, I'm going to spend about $30 a person, and I have 4 people in my family, in my family that live here, and so that's, I'm looking at a minimum of $120 to go. That creates a really high cliff, for me to decide I want to go. I used to go to a movie every week. Like that was just what I did on a Saturday or Sunday. I got kind of into the habit because at ILM, any movie that ILM or Sky Sound worked on, we would get a free screening in the mornings at at the Roland Plaza or at somewhere that was here. And so you got kind of used to going to movies all the time because we did that. And then I just got into the habit. Even when I wasn't there, I just got into the habit. I would just go to a movie. That dropped away over time, and especially when you start having kids and everything else, that I just felt like it wasn't great. And then I feel like, I don't know, Hollywood has kind of lost the thread, in a lot of, they're running out of things to make movies about. They make a lot of unforced errors inside of their films. And so I think that it's become, just harder and harder to find a movie that I want to go to. So my average of 40 or 50 movies a year has dropped to 2, maybe 3, and I'm a pretty hard moviegoer, and I'm in the industry. So I think that that's the canary in the coal mine that we're starting to see here. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree. I think when movies started going to these visual effects, basically the Marvel series and the DC Comics series, when they started mining comic books and theme park rides as the subject for a movie, they've run out of ideas, and that's kind of the problem to start with. So then they started trying just to throw money at them and make bigger and bigger CGI production, and with tons and tons. You sit through the credits in a movie theater someday for one of those tentpole movies. Which take about 10 minutes for the credits to roll through, 10 or 12 minutes or so, and look at the 7,000 people that get credit on that movie, and the 10 different visual effects houses, and you'll understand why a movie cost $600 million or $400 million to produce. With the strike on, though, there is a rumor that we may see kind of a sudden influx of indie production. Because the indies don't have contracts with the major producers and major studios. So these A24s, the ones that produce these, story-driven movies that aren't effects-driven, and they're not franchises for a toy company, and they're not, designed to market something other than the movie. You'll see a lot of production of those because SAG actors, and I don't know about writers, maybe writers as well, do have the ability to continue working on those films. So they have been given a waiver, I know, by some of the production studios here to continue work during the strike. So we may see an influx of those nice independent story movies, whether you're going to watch them in a theater or not. Like Alex said, you want to go to a theater to see the big, the building falling on people. Or people crashing into buildings, or throwing other giant transformers into buildings, and the endless parade of dancing pixels, as Deadpool used to say.
Yeah, I think that the challenge is, will people actually go to the theater to watch independent films? And I'm not clear that they will. Like, I think that the problem is that the habit of going to the theater has died, so that people aren't really there. Like, oh, I'm going to go to it's Saturday night or Friday night, I'm going to go to the theater. That's the place to go to do those things. And so it has to be something that attracts people. Like, I'm going to this film. I went to, I really enjoy Mission Impossible. And so I watched all the Mission Impossibles, and then I went to see it. And, and the funny thing is that it's a good example. The parking process at the place I went is so bad. Just paying for it. Like, I don't even care what the price is. I just can't figure out how to pay at that parking lot. Like, it's this weird, some weird phone thing. And I'm usually pretty techie, and it's super messed up. And I was just like, well, the chances of me going back, not over the movies, but just over the parking, is very low, like very low that I ever come back to that location. And just because it was stressful for me. And so, so I think that's the problem but that's all it takes now is people are like, oh, I don't need to do that anymore. And again, the problem is, to your point, Alex, I think is that the quality of the stuff that's happening on streaming is so high now too. It's not like there used to be this like TV was at a certain level and films at another level. Now there's a lot of stuff coming out on streaming that is at the same production quality that we would expect to see in a feature film, and it's at home, and there's no way to go see it in the theater. And I think that that's also a challenge because I have so much content available to me at any given time on a big screen that is very highly. I just watched. My wife and I just finished Jack Ryan last night, and it was great. Like it was and I didn't need to go see that in a feature. And the interesting thing is, from a habit forming perspective, the streamers aren't incentivized to make movies. They're making some movies, but you're watching that slowly disappear because there's no value in them putting tons of money into a 2.5 hour experience that isn't going to hold you for a while. They'd rather give you a six episode experience or 8 episode experience and develop the characters more, give you more content over time, build something that's a little deeper. And so that's also a huge challenge because now we're getting into, wow, 2.5 hours seems like a long time to watch something. I know that I'm pretty sensitive to now just thinking about where do I put a 2.5 hour block to watch something as opposed to just watching something for 45 minutes or an hour. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say also, with streaming, you can get 4K streams on just about any $50 device these days. And a lot of projectors in rural America out there are only projecting 2K on a digital screen anyway.
A lot of projectors, not just in rural America, a lot of projectors all over.
Yeah, and multiplexes, most of them are 2K projectors. And they'll have one showcase theater that'll have a 4K projector in it, but all the rest of them are 2K projectors. So you're seeing it in higher resolution at home. However, I do find that when you're not paying $7 for a cup of popcorn, it doesn't taste as good at home. It doesn't have that flavor.
I used to think
popcorn.
I used to think that, but I will say that after I found the Amish popcorn that I buy on Amazon, the Amish popcorn with the way I make it on a little thing that you turn. I can't think of
Amish mushroom popcorn with a whirly pop. Yeah, I understand.
It might be the Amish. The mushroom is really, really good. It's the closest to theater popcorn that you're going to get. But then there's these little delicate angel popcorn that's like really likes that. And different parts of my family like different people in the family like different ones, and so we trade around. And all we get, I have to admit, when you get used to that and you go back to the theater, you're like, It's like, should I really pay for this?
Connoisseur.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
You snuck in some of your own popcorn, didn't you, at that Mission Impossible?
I did not. It's funny. I don't. The reason. So the funny thing about I used to sneak a lot of things into the theater. I don't because I know the problem is I work with theaters a lot, and so I understand the math of how they make money. And as a result, I tend not to sneak anything in because I realize that that's their business model. They can't just charge more for the ticket because Hollywood takes the film studios take so much money from the theater that they make no money on the literally the only thing they make money on is those concessions for the first couple of weeks. The theater sucks all that money back, to them, and that's the way those deals work. And so I know that it's not, like I think when I was growing up, I felt like it was just me fighting the man or whatever, and me just having the thing that I want. I don't want to pay $4 of it. But then I kind of realized it is really kind of stealing from them, because it's something that affects them. They're not just gouging us because they're trying to gouge us. They're gouging us because that's the only way that theater exists. And so I stopped sneaking things in because of that. But I didn't stop until I was doing a lot of work with theaters and became more sensitive to their cash situation. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to pose this question. Do we think we're going to see an adjustment of budgets and actually go back to smartly reusing sets and, the kind of stuff like Star Trek was a perfect example of this. Not so much now, but it used to be that, sets they would minimize the number of sets being used and they would reuse things, and they were very creative about it. Because for me, as far as I'm concerned, I love seeing good effects, but the story and the writing and the characters should absolutely trump the effects. And I just think there's a lot of irresponsibility happening right now with the
Yeah.
sheer amount of money just being thrown at stuff. And actually, I looked at the numbers. According to some of the articles that I found here, Star Trek Season 3, which had a new showrunner, and as far as I'm concerned, Picard Season 3 had I didn't like the first 2 seasons. As a longtime Star Trek fan, I thought the writing was awful. This Season 3 was amazing, but apparently the amount of money that they spent, it was done on a very tight budget. The amount of money they spent on the entire season is as much as they're spending on one episode of Discovery, which don't even get me started on the writing there. But that's a prime example. And I would love to see more just people being frugal with this stuff, because I don't think these shows need to be that expensive.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it goes through so many rounds of of revision that you're not sure if it's really worth it anymore. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, the problem is for theatrical release, the majors are all looking at global release, so they want something that'll play in any language. So it can't have a very complex storyline or a storyline that only works in a certain culture. It has to be a universal culture, and everybody likes comic books. They're easy to understand. They have, 4 sentences of dialogue throughout the entire movie. So they're easy to translate, easy to dub, and everybody understands the action. So that's why you're seeing all these action movies, and that's why they're pouring all the money into them, because they can make one movie and distribute it globally. The episodic television, what you're talking about as far as the story arcs and the, episodic television has been doing that for, a number of years. They've been doing, independent show, each show, has a beginning, middle, end, like the original Star Trek or like, a Next Generation, where each episode could be viewed without necessarily, having to follow a series, chronological time from one episode to the next. Nowadays, they've gotten into the long story arc that covers, the whole season. And that makes for more binge viewing and more serial viewing. They discovered that people would, if they missed one, they used to catch them on the reruns. But now, since you can stream them, they want to stream the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense for the streamers. I think that the stories that have made the most money are Law and Order, because there is no thread. Like you can open up a Law and Order because their syndication has been they made so much money on syndication that it hasn't, they've just printed money with that series. And I think we need more of those to some degree. But I think that the real question, especially as we go through the strike, is what's going to happen. Right now, we're looking at, in 2025, if this strike goes until the end of the year, there'll be almost nothing in 2025. Like there's just no, like there won't be any writing, and then there won't be any.
You mean
production.
almost nothing in 2024?
No, in 2024, they've probably shot a lot of movies are probably in the, not in the can, but they're in post-production, which isn't, hit by the union. So they've shot a lot of stuff. You'll still see movies come out in 2024 that they've already finished all the live action work on. So I think 2024 will be lighter. 2025 could be a wasteland. And then that'll, it's just another 1-2 punch from COVID and everything else. And I think that theaters also have to think about, theaters are a great place to get people together. The question are movies the only thing they could do there? You're starting to see Fathom events doing more events across those theaters. You're seeing IMAX doing live streaming across the theaters. You're seeing a lot of other things happening in those theaters. And I think that what we may be getting ready for is not so much that films are going to recover, but that theaters are going to figure out other things to do with a large space that can be tied together. So I think more likely 2, 3, 4 years from now, we'll end up with a lot of screens that are dedicated to things that are other than movies. Because I think the era of going to the theater it's not that it's going to go away, but I don't know if it justifies 16,000 screens. Next question.
From Jack Rupel in Breckenridge, Colorado, many cameras experience overheating, causing short recording times. Can an external battery remedy or extend the recording time by not having a hot battery in the camera? Could the battery bay hold a fanless cooler instead?
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know if there's such a thing as a fanless cooler. There's Peltier chips, but that just creates heat on one side, which has to be removed and cool on the other side. So you still got to use a fan on to get to move the heat somewhere else. Or water coolers, which has a closed system of water that moves it somewhere else, where, of course, there has to be a heat exchanger. So heat has to go away. It's not necessarily the battery that gets hot. It's the chips themselves that get hot. All those transistors that are heating up to sample those pixels get hot after a long period of time. And that's why all the cameras that are out there shooting production have fans that kick on automatically as soon as you hit the stop button to cool the chips back down. So try and manage it so that when you hit it again, if you're doing live video, that's a problem. And if you're doing extended long takes, like 30-minute takes, it's a problem. But normal production where you're doing a 3 to 5 minute take and then you're shutting down and it'll be 5 minutes before the next take, they have a chance to cool the temperature back down on the heat sinks so that they can do another take without them overheating. Moving the battery someplace else probably wouldn't do much to cool it off.
For smaller cameras, so if they have an internal camera, we've definitely had something like GoPros. One of our things that we used to do when we were streaming from GoPros was immediately pull the batteries out and power them from their USBs. In fact, there was no way. Now, we had 6 of them right next to each other because we were doing 360 streaming out of them. So it can, pulling the batteries out can help them manage cooling to some degree. So, and it's just the battery does get warmer. It doesn't get hot, but it gets warmer when it's being used. And so that can affect it over time. But it also depends on the temperature. Sometimes you have to just figure out a way you're going to cool the camera. I know that there was a production in Mexico that a friend of mine worked on where they had to have these big water packs, like these iced water packs put on the red cameras to keep them from overheating. so it was, and that was kind of an ongoing. You were going to say something, Courtney?
I remember shooting in the desert in the 70s with a Panaflex, and we had to put ice packs on the camera because it would get so hot that the boards in the camera wouldn't function correctly.
Right.
And that's with the film camera. So it's been a perennial problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Mitchell Hill from Wilmington, Delaware is back wanting to know, what is your preferred external monitor recorder to use with your DSLR camera? Extra points for Apple ProRes.
My favorite that I've ever used is the Pixie, the Sound Devices Pixie 5. It was just this great. I mean, I still have. It's just out of reach over there, but it's a small monitor. It has tons of tools, ProRes, scopes, all kinds of little bits and bobs. It handles audio really well. We were able to put XLR inputs on the bottom. There's a little extra piece that you could pop onto it. That's been my favorite. I think the Blackmagic 12G is, I think, my new favorite of those. And then after that, I would say there's a host of Atomos monitors, including the one that I'm fiddling with right now, which isn't very expensive, or I will be fiddling with over the weekend, that I think are also pretty solid monitors. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you mentioned my favorite, the Blackmagic Design 12. There it is for 12G SDI 7-inch. Because it records in H.264 or ProRes or MXF in kind of wrappers that you need. So it does a great job of that. And it gives you a monitor to look at with some, audio monitoring. You've got, meters on it. It does conversion between SDI and HDMI, and it has balanced audio inputs on it too. So that's another neat thing that a lot of them don't have. If you want to use other than the Pix240 to bring balanced audio in and embed it in the video.
Yeah, and the other one that to look at is the Shogun. Atomos makes a Shogun, and that's if you are specifically looking for Atmos. I'm sorry, not Atmos, but Vision. I think the only small monitor that supports Dolby Vision is the Shogun. So also think about that if you need HDR. There is HDR support, I believe, in the 12G, but it's HDR10 and HLG and not Vision itself. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is asking, have any of you experienced neck strain issues if you're using an external monitor with your MacBook Pro and have the majority of your project on the external monitor positioned next to your MacBook Pro?
The answer is yes, for me anyway, and it has to do with the where your eye line is. And so typically, I think that what I was told and what I use now when I think about where that monitor goes is if the monitor's here, I try to make sure that my eyes are just above in that top third right here. So I'm looking slightly down and never that far up. But that's the line that I'm usually trying to manage there. And I found that definitely reduces the amount of neck strain that I have. But if you do something where you're looking down like this or looking up, it definitely affects how your neck works. So definitely take that into account. Next question.
From Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, is Google's news writing AI tool that it's pitching to major news outlets really a tool designed to replace them? And he offers up a link on theguardian.com.
Good, John.
So the good thing about Bard is it indexes not only to the LLM, but also the search engine information. And they did a fantastic job of integrating both browser information and the LLM into one interface, unlike GPT that has a plugin for all the web stuff, and it's really clunky and really slow. So hats off to Google for integrating those two together. I just don't think news outlets will use this product.
Yeah, I don't think that they'll use it immediately. I think some smaller news outlets are already starting to use some of these tools. And really what the advantage of these tools are not really to write the pieces that are on the front page. There are a lot of perfunctory things that you see in a newspaper that you really don't need a person writing, and that's the thing that I think that is the summary of the city council meetings, and these all cost money. Like they cost money for the newspapers. They it's part of what the service that they provide. But there are updates on stocks, and these are the basic what they've learned. And this is 5 years ago. They could build AI that would write, what happened in the stock market today, and without commentary, just basically telling you what's what, and nobody knew the difference, like between that and a person writing it. And so I think that there are definitely things that can be written that are kind of these, like, another good example is we're starting to use Midjourney more and more for thumbnails, for a variety of different shows and so on and so forth. I use them sometimes for MacBreak, and they're really fun. That can be very creative, but it doesn't have to be something specific, and it doesn't really generate revenue. It just makes it kind of fun. And so I think those are the places where AI really is going to be used. I think that you're going to see city council meetings is a good example. I always use it because, almost nobody knows what's happening there. And it's because it's not very well published. And so I think that so I use it as an example because it's the kind of thing that you could record the city council meeting, transcribe it into 60 languages, put it back into voices if you wanted to, and then summarize it and send it to the paper, and that could all happen in 15 minutes after the show, after it happened, and more people would know what their government's doing. Maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe that's why they don't want to do it. But that would be those kinds of things are something that AI can do really well that you wouldn't necessarily want to pay a person to do, or a high level person to do. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the big question is, can the AI create new conspiracy theories, from scratch? So that, that seems
it
to
doesn't
be
have to create it. It is a conspiracy
thing
theory
that's on all of the news coverage these days.
Yeah. The idea that it would just give you the facts and not a lot of commentary, that would be very unusual. Quick reminder that, of course, you can ask questions throughout the first hour. We're going to be talking about loading in, loading out in the second hour, and what you want to think about and how you want to approach that. And if you have other questions about digital media production, go ahead and throw them in for the first hour coverage, and make sure to vote on them because that tells us how you'd like us to answer them. Next question.
From Khalid Al-Jumaya is Hassa, Saudi Arabia. Alex, any update about the annotation app? I'm very excited. I can't wait to use it.
Overall, it works great. I got colors. I can change the colors here. I've got lots of, I can change the thickness. This is the update for it. And you can see that it's nice and smooth, not like the one that I had before. But I can, make it nice and, really nice and thick. And then immediately, make it thinner here. So you can kind of do those kind of things. So it's working really well. The Mac version works really well. There's a couple little things that we're fiddling with on the iPad version. So, and they're both theoretically going to be one app. So it's just mostly some real minor stuff. If you're interested in beta testing it, you can reach out to me directly. Tell me how you're going to use it, and we'll see if we can't get you on the beta. It's super close. Wansi Robles has been doing an amazing job at putting it together. I'm really happy with it, and so I use it every day. so anyway, but I'd like to get a couple of things. I have to admit that I'm very adverse to negative reviews on the App Store, so I'm trying to get a couple things that for most people would be minor, but I know would show up eventually. So we're just trying to hammer some of those things out. And so anyway, it's good. But if you want to beta, just reach out to me in Discord. Next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado returns with, I am presenting 2 posters at an international snow science workshop. PDF format size, font size limited. Can I fit QR codes, augmented reality anchors, USD references, YouTube clips? Conference goers may scan and view.
Yeah, I'm just PDF format size font limit.
So he's got his posters tight in size, so he's concerned about resolution, I think.
Yeah, I mean PDFs can be pretty small, and if you're putting them on a poster, you can get them. You don't have to be very large. Now, what I will tell you is that what I do, I use a lot of QR codes for the events that I work on. I also buy a URL usually, and that URL is usually 6 to 7 characters long that has something to do with the event. So it might be, it's some kind of shortened version of, it might be askalex.com or augment this or whatever it is. Those kinds of things are the kind of things that I'll build a short URL, cost me $8, and then I'll tie it together, for where I want people to go. It'll bounce from there to where I want them to go. You can use Bitly and you can use a lot of other things, but I find it. I don't do enough events where I can't just go ahead and build, buy another account. I mean, there's so many URLs now, .io, .shop, whatever it is. And a lot of them are $8, and it's just nicer it's much more custom to have something like that than a Bitly. Bitly turns a lot of people off. Whereas if you build a nice short URL, you can build it on your own. So that's what I would recommend as far as a URL goes. As far as from there, you can how you use USDZ and references, you should be able to scan and view those right now. It should take you to a web page that'll allow you to do that. I don't really know the mechanism of that at the moment. What we would do typically, most of the stuff I've done is object-based. So you want to see an object, you hit a QR code, it'll pop up an object and this works on your iPhone, doesn't necessarily work on Android. And it'll just want to be set somewhere on the ground, on a table, whatever. And as soon as you hit it, it just pops up into space. So that stuff works right now. As far as other clips and videos, you should be able to again, if you build this URL the way I'm talking about it, it can forward back to it. So take that into account. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back asking, what resolution do you run your MacBook Pro at? How can you mitigate the eye stream when working at higher resolutions for long periods?
So I'm a little older. I run at 1080p. I would I don't run everything in 4K. What I've done is I don't need to because I have many monitors. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 monitors with all kinds of different information that I need, and they're all at 1080p. So instead of trying to pack everything into one monitor, I've just found that I like to spread it all out and have it. I can look at it where I want to look at it, and I can focus on what I want to focus on. I've got this new monitor. I don't know if I can pull this into screen that I'm testing. Let's see, this little tiny one, and it has a Visa mount on the back, but USB-C powered, and I'm just about to plug it into a bunch of things. But it's super small. It's designed as like a little travel monitor, but I'm playing with using these because they're a little smaller and easier to work with there. So anyway, point is that I prefer more monitors, and it does make you very sensitive to laptops. I think that's one of the reasons I don't like laptops anymore, is that I'm so used to having so much real estate all the time that going back to a laptop is pretty painful. Next question.
From Jesse Mills, San Francisco Bay Area, I have changed a few friendly name devices in Windows using the registry and was hoping that these friendly names would show up in the Zoom Rooms controller. They did not. Is this possible?
Names. Oh, because the Zoom Room has codes. It's using codes. I don't know if you need to do that in the device names in the registry. I think if I remember correctly, how we do it is we change the names inside of Zoom. So inside of the Zoom reference, if we're doing Zoom Rooms controller, if I'm reading your question correctly, what we do is we go into Zoom and we can go into the Zoom Rooms and we can change their names there. That's what the controller is looking at when it builds the names, is what's defined inside of Zoom, not what's. I don't think they pay attention to what's in the computer. Next question.
John Fisher from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, is investing in a video camera for family adventures. If you were buying today, GoPro Hero 11 or Insta360 Go 3.
If I was going to choose between the two of those, I'd get the Insta360 Go 3. I think that GoPro has been a great company. I've had so much trouble. I don't have the 11. I think the last one I bought was the 9, and I bought almost every one of them since up until about the 9. And there was a point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore, and so I haven't bought the 10 or 11. So maybe they've gotten significantly better or gone back to the basics or whatever. The interface is just so bad on the GoPro, and it has been forever. And you get used to the abuse, but it's really, they need to rethink that completely. And it broke new ground, and a lot of people got used to it, but I think they've kind of missed it. The other ones I would look at is the DJI makes their own as well. So I would take a look at that one as, and compare it with everything else. But if I was choosing between a GoPro and an Insta360, I'd pick the Insta360. They're moving much faster. Like they have velocity. They're innovating a lot faster than most of the other camera groups. Next question.
Gordon Lake from Los Angeles, California, is asking, is the PTZ Optics Studio Pro a good webcam solution? And he offers up a link from BH Photo.
And I'm, let's see here. Sorry, I'm a little behind on capturing that one there. Okay, yeah. So this is it's a little live streaming 1080p 60 USB-C and HDMI output. I don't know. I mean, it looks really nice actually. So this is PTZ Optics. It is let's see. They don't. I'm looking for their what they don't define, and what always bothers me is when the first thing that I look at when I see a new camera is chip size. So I just want to know how big the, I don't really care about what and I guess I feel often like when I don't get a really great chip size, then I get worried that it's not going to turn out. But what I will say is that it's really, I will say, we should see if we can get a hold of one of these. This looks like a great camera. I'm like, I don't know because we haven't used it yet, but this looks like it solves many problems. This one is really designed for a webcam, usage. It's designed for people to do exactly what we've been talking about. The video sensor is, it's a 1/3 inch chip. So that's kind of an unfortunate, it's an unfortunate thing that that PTZ Optics, it feels like they're very close. So it's the field of view is horizontal field of view is 72 degrees, which is a really nice. It's still a little wider than I would go, but it's pretty. It's much better than the 90 or the 120 or what a lot of other people are doing. So I like that. It looks like a solid build. It's pretty expensive. And at $699, it needs to have at least a 1/2 inch chip, if not a 1 inch chip. So if they swap the chip out and charge $100 more, I think that they might actually sell. I really think that someone ought to do exactly what PTZ Optics is doing, but make it Super 35. They would sell as many as they could make, at $700 or $800 or even $999. A Super 35 web camera at $999 would sell as many as they could make. Because people would suddenly, it's just a missing piece. What PTZ Optics looks like, they got everything else right. Like that camera looks like it might be nice to have PTZ, which is what they have, but of course they're trying to bring that price down. But what I will say is they've got everything else correct except for the chip size, and the chip size does matter. It isn't something that you can kind of get around a lot of times. Next question.
From Andy Korkendorfer, Vieira, Florida, is it possible to show multiple camera sources from a single Zoom presenter directly without a switcher?
It is with Zoom Rooms. So Zoom Rooms can provide that. I think you can get up to if you make it up for that presenter. It's not out of the bare basics. For some reason, I think that you could theoretically put two in. You could put two sources out from a regular Zoom room using the screen share and optimizing for video. And so there's a way to potentially do that. But you could do a Zoom room and it will do only audio out of the first one, out of the main camera. But you could have up to, I believe, 4 other outputs from that, from that Zoom room that are going back into Zoom that could be cut between. So that might be one option to do multi-camera from there. Next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado is back. Live streaming on YouTube and other platforms often hosts miss something in the comments. Is it possible to use a receipt printer to have a hard copy of comments?
The hosts often miss something in the comments. Yeah, a lot of hosts don't even look at the comments. I was actually talking to someone about this in their live stream. They will glance at it, but they don't want to see all of them because a lot of the comments are so bad. And so they I don't know if a lot of them want to see anything in the comments, or I just talked to a lot of creators that try to skip the comments altogether. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I don't understand the receipt printer because it would probably make noise during the show. And then what would you do? Bring up a little, piece of paper and read the comments off of it. It'd be better off just to have someone moderating the comments and pulling selected comments out and putting them in a text file and putting them up on a teleprompter or something.
And automating it would be remarkably hard because of the way that for privacy reasons and all kinds of other things, YouTube makes it really hard to use APIs to grab comments. So I know because we've tried to tie our systems into theirs, and it's something that we just gave up on. So we can do it with about a week of warning, but we don't do it regularly because it's just so rough. Next question.
Jesse Mills from the San Francisco Bay Area has another question. What is the most affordable way to scale a 16:10 MacBook output to 16:9? Would like to mirror the display rather than create a secondary resolution or aspect.
If you mirror the display to a 1080p source, it should just go to 1080p. Like most Mac Pros, if I plug a Mac Pro into my Extreme and I say mirror, it's going to, it should mirror to that, 1080p. It should snap all the screens to a 16:9. That's what it does for me anyway. So I don't know. It shouldn't. If you're doing the only way we ever got 16:10 is a common. Obviously, that's what the Mac will do. But but if you use HDMI, so it's USB-C to HDMI or HDMI, it'll work. If you go DVI or DVI-D, or DVI or DVI-D, it would, if you're converting to that in some way, shape, or form, it will stick to the 16:10 because that's a known format for it. But I have not ever seen that happen with HDMI. Next question.
Our regular contributor here on the panel, Mitchell Hill from Wilmington, Delaware, is asking, the great Tony Bennett just passed at the age of 96. Would it be possible to have AI sample of his voice and provide a new rendition? R.I.P. Tony.
I bet you he would think that was funny. Like when you see interviews with him, he seems pretty easygoing. He seemed pretty easygoing about those things. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
You can have a new song. I left my voice in San Francisco server or something.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be perfect. Next question.
From Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. With so much discussion of camera autofocus, how about spatial audio autofocus and mixing? I have a first order ambisonic mic recorder and Zoom F3 with 2 shotgun mics or contact mics and GoPro Media mod mic, camera focus guides, spatial audio.
Yeah, I think that we needed to talk about how we're doing what we're doing in a little bit more detail. So stay tuned for that, and we'll talk about how we're processing that. So I think that I don't know if it'd be auto mixing, but I think that it would be. I think we could play with some. I think we should illustrate what we're doing. So stay tuned for that. Next question.
Alexander Knight from Vancouver, British Columbia, and here on the panel, Atomos have a 17-inch and 24-inch HDR monitor that looks very well spec'd and is reasonably priced. Anyone in the field test these and have good results. He provides an atomos.com link.
So I haven't owned one or bought it, but I've definitely seen them on set, and they look amazing. So I will say that it has been. Now, I admit that on the a lot of the sets that I have that I'm using HDR monitors, I'm using monitors that are a little more expensive than those ones, and so they've kept up. These ones don't look as good as the Sony the Sony cameras that we're using, the Sony monitors that we're using, but those Sony monitors, are in they're measured in tens of thousands of dollars, for those displays, and so, but I think that they've been very competitive. And definitely for the price. I think Atomos has done a pretty good job with the 17 and 24-inch monitors. Next question.
Mitchell Hill from Wilmington, Delaware is back. How do I get a baby pin spigot on my C-stand boom? It's just a straight rod.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know. I mean, the rod on a C-stand is 5/8 of an inch, the same diameter as the baby pin is. So you could use it as a baby pin and then just mount a bail mount or three-way mounting block, they call them, which is designed to accept a 5/8 inch spigot, 5/8 inch pin on whatever it is you're trying to attach to the end of the C-stand. And I don't understand unless you have something with a pin on it that you want to attach to the end of the arm. Use the other end of the arm that has the knuckle on it. You lock it into the knuckle. That's what the knuckle is for, is locking in a pin. And the other end of the arm, which is just a straight rod, is 5/8 inch, and you can slide, any 5/8 inch mounting block over that and tighten it down. So I'm not sure what you need that isn't already accommodated by the C-stand.
Next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado. Could AI focus only conference presentations, scientific journals, industry publications to promote a disruptive domain knowledge concept?
I think I probably have to get a definition of what you mean by a disruptive domain knowledge concept. So I maybe that's a newer term that I haven't. I'm trying to. Yeah, I don't know if I can. I could probably ask ChatGPT. This would be the most circular thing, is to ask ChatGPT what that is. It's a new way of doing. Okay, here we go. 7 days ago. Wow, it's very new. Disruptive technology, a new way of doing something that causes. It's just disruptive. That's not disruptive. Domain. Just rethinking the role of domain expertise in disruptive efforts. Yeah. I'd have to think about that a little bit. So it's the first time I've seen that term, and I know that I probably in the internet I should have seen all of those terms in detail, but I haven't seen that one. So we'll come back to that. But I will now I'm going to need to know what that is, and so stay tuned for that. A quick reminder that tomorrow we have accessibility. We'll be talking about accessibility there in the workforce. I think that the accessibility Saturdays have gone really, really well. And not only have they been great subjects to discuss, but they have also been just the process of what we're doing and how we're doing those have been really, really interesting. So definitely stay tuned for that. I'll be there tomorrow morning with everybody for the first hour to answer your questions. So if you've got questions about accessibility or just general tech questions, go ahead and make sure to come by on Saturday morning. Of course, Sunday is the day that we have introspection. I don't think we talk about it much. We just kind of assume everybody knows what Sunday is. But Sunday is when we if you have questions about office hours or more philosophical questions, we dealt with a little bit of, if you saw that little thing we talked about theater, well, that's what Sunday's like the whole time. So we talk a little bit about that. So definitely, if you feel like asking more questions about what we're doing here, the industry, more philosophical questions around how media impacts the world, those are things that we kind of tend to talk about on Sunday. You don't know that because we don't stream it. It's kind of a open conversation that we have there. So also a quick reminder that we are still looking for volunteers if you're interested in working on the second hours, working out with us, figuring out how to research those, how to define those. You'll see a link that I posted in Discord about that in the Alex announcements. So if you're interested in being part of the second hour production, let us know. And welcome to the second hour where we talk about, we're going to talk about loading in, loading out. I know it seems like, we're a group that has been capable of talking for an hour about gaff tape. So I felt like we're also a group that could probably talk about loading in and loading out. If the panelists have any things they want to add, go ahead and raise your hand in the panel view there. But, one of the things that there is in most things when we're talking about shows, we'll tell you all the time, and this is just for a general show, you got to know the most important thing is how do you get into the show and how do you get out of the show? And so in the same way, because once you get into the show, there's a thing, but how do you get the thing started? How do you end it? In the same way, how do you get into the building? It turns out to be a thing, So there's a couple things that you kind of want to think about. And we'll jump into questions and then come back to some examples as well. But if anyone here wants to add anything, but one of the things that you want to really think about is it's really important. You can have an entire show fall apart because you don't know how you are going to get in. You get there and so we've had issues where, for instance, I don't think I have any good pictures of this, but someone didn't take a picture. So we were coming in with, it depends on the kind of gear that you have also. So when I started doing load-ins, we started with, I think we had a catering cart that we put a bunch of, I think that they were like little milk crates, and we just threw cables into them. And we rolled them from our office, which is about a block away from Moscone, into Moscone, it seemed perfectly fine because it was our first show that we had ever done. And we thought that wasn't that big of a deal, but it was a real, it was very painful, to get in and out. You have a cart isn't very good to get up and down things. There's a lot of things, especially like a catering cart, just wasn't really built for this. And so we started with those kinds of things. We then, moved to, some more cases and so on and so forth. Over time, we started buying Pelican cases, so Pelican cases were what we used for there. And then what happens as you kind of grow and work on larger projects, you move from Pelican cases to road cases. And those road cases come off of trucks, and how you load in starts to change. What I will say is that I was watching I went to a concert the other night, and saw two different bands play, and you could tell one band is the opening act and the other band is the touring act, and you could tell the difference between who's done this a lot versus. So the opening act had things in bags, they had little boxes, they had all these little things. The touring act had road cases that just opened up with all their guitars and opened up with all the bits and pieces, because once you do this for 20 years or whatever, or 30 years, things kind of refine. In fact, with the I've had the wardrobes are road cases, the printer and everything else is all loaded in inside of those pieces there. But I think that those are the things that you want to start. You start to, as you do this more. So the idea here is maybe we can save you a little time on kind of talking about how you get in and out of those. But what I was going to say earlier was we had someone do a walkthrough, and walkthroughs are really important when you have a larger event. You may think, I can just show up, and you can for a smaller event, and you don't have a lot of gear, and the gear isn't very heavy. But as soon as you start going, I'm going to have a road case, or I'm going to have a pretty much a bag that's larger than 50 pounds. As soon as something's more than 50 pounds, you need to know how you're going to get in there. Because if you come in and you have a 70-pound case and you have to take that up 6 flights of stairs because there's no elevator, you're going to really wish you had done a walkthrough and figured out what that was going to look like to make that actually happen. So so we make a lot of decisions. Walkthroughs are really, really important for us. And figuring out, and again, one of my complaints is I'll have people go in and they'll take a bunch of pictures of the room that I'm going to do the event in. If I send somebody out to do a walkthrough, they'll go through it, but then they won't manage the egress. Like, how am I going to get in and out of the And typically what I do is I have them take a lot of photos of the different ways to get in. And then oftentimes I have them walk, like just turn your camera on and walk from the front door where I'm supposed to load in. I want you to walk all the way up, to where we're going to load in. And I just need you to capture a video of that so I can see it. So I know what's going on. Now, if someone's has done this a lot, I don't need to do that because they'll write down, there's a hump here. There's what I keep on wrapping around them to come back to. There was what someone didn't annotate for us on a load in was that there was a 3-inch kind of step, one step. Everything else is all just a, path out to, I don't know, 42nd Street in New York or something like that. But everything else was a smooth load in. And so all the pictures, and the picture that they took was taken over from the high point of the step. So when we looked at the pictures, we thought, oh, okay, this will work. We can load cases in. When we got there, what we didn't realize is that it dropped 3 inches. And a lot of our cases were too heavy for one person to just pull over 3 inches, because these are all road cases. And so what we ended up having to do is plant 2 people there and then have another 2 people coming in and out with the case and lift it up over that and lift it up over that. And that was super taxing for our crew, to make that happen. And so those are the kind of things that can happen if you don't really pay attention to how you're going to get in, how you're going to get out. Also, you want to take a look at, I'll see if I can find some pictures for you here. But the other thing is that you want to look at, like, I take a lot of pictures of docks. So I've been loading in and out of docks for 30 years, and you want to pay attention to the height. Is there a dock height load in, and will you have access to that? Or is there a ramp to the side of the dock? Because if you have a low car, you're going to show up in a small, you get sensitive to what is dock height and what's not dock height. So if you have a truck that you want to be looking for trucks that are dock height, if you're going into a dock, that means you can back in and just roll everything out. If you come in, if you rent a U-Haul that is not dock height, which is most U-Hauls are not dock height, you're now going to have to figure out how you're going to get them off that truck and how you're going to get it up the ramp. Is there a ramp? How is that going to work? Where is that going to go? And also now you have a U-Haul truck, and does it have a ramp that will pull out, or is it something that you need to bring a ramp to pull those things out? Because now you don't have anywhere to just load off of. The great thing about dock heights, if you're bringing a lot of big stuff in, is that you just roll it straight out on the dock and you're off to the races. And so those are the things that you want to be thinking about. Those little humps. It's what really gets you on load in, load out, are little bumps. Like there's a foot here that you have to cover, and it doesn't seem like a big deal until you have to cover it 100 times to get all your stuff out. And so knowing exactly what where you're going to go, how you're going to get through it. Also, when you talk about load in, are you loading into a large facility, and is that facility a union facility? So if you're going into a large hotel, or if you're going in, specifically if you're going into a convention center, generally the people that are going to be there are Teamsters. And it's their job to take things off your truck, not you. And so you need to be. It means a couple things. One is, and that's done, by the way, for as much for safety. If you had everybody pulling everything off of their car off their trucks randomly, it would create chaos. So having the team that's running the dock makes sense, because it just means that they understand who's doing what and it's being coordinated. But it also means that you're scheduling dock time. So you're now going to say, I'm going to be here. And usually, on a large event that we go into, we schedule, like, I will be here at 12:15. And sometimes you're not going to be there, and you're going to go to a holding location. So you're expected to check into a holding location that might be 2 or 3 miles away, and you're going to sit there and wait until they tell you that they're ready for you. But they're not going to put you in line until you're in the holding position. So you can't just show up at the venue and expect to get in. They're coordinating. They're building that process, and there's someone that you have to ask, who's coordinating this, especially at a large convention or conference where there's a lot of stuff going in and out of a convention center. There's a lot of coordination that's required there to make sure that works. But it also means when someone else is loading your stuff out, it also means that you need to make sure that you pack everything in a way that makes sense. So that means that you are clearly marking what's yours. You're saying how many. This is case 4 out of 20. This is the room that it goes into. This is these are the things that are, so everything has to be clearly marked on the way in. We spray paint. We would spray paint stuff on all of our cases. So for PixelCore, we had this PixelCore logo, and we had a stencil, and we just spray painted on everything to make sure that people knew whose it was. And then on a piece of paper, we would print out, this goes to room EJ 134. This is one of whatever, and those are the kind of things that you want to think about as you go in. You do, especially if you're loading in yourself, you want to think about how far it is from the dock to where you're going. So, for instance, a good example is at the Wynn in Vegas. The delta between where you load in and where you will be is oftentimes close to a mile. Like I'm not underestimating it. It is very close to a mile. It definitely feels like 10 if you didn't put everything on rollers. And so you have a whole crew, but that means you have to mark the time. How long is it going to take you? You're going to have to add 30 minutes to the time just to get from where you're going to where you're, to the location. So those are the kind of things that you want to think about. Also consider that people will make decisions about your production based on how you load in. And I know that seems like an odd thing to think about, but they are going to decide that you know what you're doing based on the quality of your load in. So when you're talking to them ahead of time, when you're figuring out how you're going to get in, when you're talking about like what the rules are, when you're talking about how, all of those questions that you have, the management that you have, the tightness in which you arrive, all of those things, and then the quality of literally the cases that you have. We had a guy come in one time for a pretty high-end event, and he had everything all kind of bundled up into a piece of luggage. Like it was like a travel luggage, and then he opened it up, and it's got all this gunk of all these cables, and they're not wrapped properly and everything else. No one will respect you after that. Like they'll think that you don't know it. Especially, you can do that if you're like 22 years old, but if you're like in your 30s or 40s and you come in with a bag, how you present yourself in all of those cases makes a difference. And I had I might have told this before, but we were at the White House and we were doing something, and the person came up to us and said, you're the best production company that's been here in the last 29 years. I was like, who was here 29 years ago? I was like thinking these are superstars. I've only been here for 29 years. And so, but I asked him, he said, I just knew in our meeting, I knew you guys were going to make this work really well. And I said, when did you know? Like, I'm just curious, like, what did I say that made it that he goes, you asked how many carpet squares? You said, we think that we'll need 55 carpet squares. And should we bring those or will you? And he said, then I knew that you guys were paying attention, to what you're doing. And so it's the details of asking those things. You don't want to ask too many things, but you do want to take care in what all of those look like. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you covered a lot of the high points there. One thing you should remember is if you're going into a hotel ballroom, a lot of times they will not let you bring any equipment through the lobby or through any of the normal human pathways into that ballroom. You'll have to come in to the loading dock, up a service elevator if it's not on that ground floor, and through an amazing winding series of maze of corridors sometimes to get to the ballroom. So walk before you start moving any equipment, get off the truck, find the banquet manager or whoever is in charge of the ballroom, and walk from the loading dock up to the door that takes you into the ballroom where you're setting up. And look at every corridor, every turn, because they will have carts stacked with old food trays and things on the corners and chairs stacked where it's going to be tight corners to make the corner. So make sure that all your large cases are going to be able to make it through the labyrinth of backstage corridors that you may have to travel through to get to the place that you're going to, as Alex said, especially in the casino-based hotels in Vegas where they have, huge casinos that cover 4 blocks. A lot of times, there's no loading dock near the place where you're taking your stuff in. So you have to travel a circuitous route, and they don't want you traveling with the gamblers. You have to travel backstage with, all the waiters and things that are hustling food around. So walk that route first, take a tape measure with you to measure any tight clearances and know the sizes of your cases.
Yeah, and picking the size of your cases is important. We've definitely had people show up without without thinking about the size of their cases, and they just simply can't get them through the through the door. So that is, and typically, we think of cases as, I think that we typically run at, there's the case width and then a little bit more. So the rack width. So usually 24 inches is usually about what we're looking at. We try not to go much wider than that. And then you have to also think about the depth of the case. And usually 35 inches is about as deep as we'll go, mostly because just you can't turn the corner, on a lot of those things otherwise. So it's definitely very important to kind of think through those processes. And again, that's why for a large event, you want to, as Courtney said, if you show up, you want to walk through it. For a large event where you're bringing a larger crew in, you want to think about it. And, we bring I load a lot of things in that you wouldn't normally load in. Like, for instance, I don't like, if I'm at a 3-day event, I'm not going to use the house chairs. so our truck is going to show up with nice cushy chairs that we're going to use because, it affects, it may seem like overkill to bring 20 padded chairs, but it affects the effectiveness of it impacts the effectiveness of my team. If they're sitting there moving their butts around all the time, trying to figure out how to stay comfortable and they're uncomfortable, the team comfort is really, really important. And so those are things that we really think about a lot. The other thing is if you're going to make requests, you make them right when you show up. So we try to get there as early as they'll let us go in, because if you come in, if you get stacked, you may say, oh, I can save some money if I load in the day before instead of 4 days before. I'll try to load in 4 days before, even if it's a skeletal crew. And the reason for that is I want to I want to protect my area. So when we send a rider out of what we're going to do, I'm going to tell them exactly how much space I need, and so I'm going to go, I need, it's this space and I need this to be, 30 feet by, 40 feet or whatever. This is the space. I expect it to be unencumbered without any support poles. So I'll say that pretty clearly of this is the space that I want, and they'll tell us where that space is. And we're usually going to expect to have a little marker on it that says it's ours. Now, what I'm calculating, by the way, is that, I have a table, like tables like this. This is going to be a 30-inch, and I need 3 feet this way and 2 feet that way, to make sure that I actually have it. I have a whole thing about not being on L's, we've learned to be very specific about this. We'll lay out, where we want power dropped and so on and so forth as we get ready for the load in. But I'll get there and almost to the inch, I'll sit there and make sure that I have what I asked for, because the only time I can ask for it is when I get there. After that, it's just, there's too many cases. They're all wired together and it's over, and now you're going to be stuck with whatever you figured out there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and when you're working in a multi-story building, like you're shooting in the penthouse of a 30-story building, never underestimate the amount of time it's going to take you to get that equipment from the loading dock up through an elevator. Maybe sometimes just a small service elevator that only can hold one cart, maybe 2 carts at a time. If you've got a 40-footer out there and you've got to get all that equipment up to the top floor, it can take you an hour and a half to 2 hours just to move it up from the ground floor to the top floor. So bear in mind that you may be sharing that elevator with the hotel. That's one problem. And, so it takes time to go up, load each one, unload it, and then take it back down. And especially if you're planning on coming in and going out on the same day, that is definitely budget enough time to handle that transition from street level to high level.
And be aware of your surroundings too. So as you go into higher end locations, they're going to have a different level of expectation of what you're going to do. For instance, you cannot take your own carts through the Four Seasons lobby. Ask me how I know. So anyway, they do not appreciate that. And someone will be very particular, come over and talk to you about it. And so if you have a smaller kit, you may use some of the luggage, some of the luggage stuff. If you're coming in with a handful of cases, they may allow you to do that. But you want to talk about that ahead of time. You don't want to assume that they're going to do that. And then the other thing that we, for load in is, there's a couple things that I would say about load into a location that is keep your cases away from the walls. So when you open up a Pelican case, for instance, when you open the case, the top of the case, it's going to swing out. Your Pelican case is typically here, and your this is going to swing out. The distance between this and the wall should be about 3 feet. Like it's just there. It can be as little as 1 foot, but it should not be any closer than that. So when you open that case, when you swing it open, it should never, ever, ever touch the wall. And people have a tendency when they first start loading in is to put those cases, just to stack them like this, and then they open them and then they whack them and then this hits things and everything else. Just know that a lot of people that work at the venue will notice that. They'll notice that you're doing that. And if anything goes, they'll go back and check that wall, and then they'll send you a bill. So be careful of how you interact. This also comes into when you're in nice locations. You're going to pay attention to every corner that you're not going to hit. When we load into really nice locations, and there's a lot to load into, we're going to lay down cardboard flats. We're going to put padding across. We actually run oftentimes paper or something thick all the way down the walls to make sure that no one's hitting anything, and we're not bringing in dirt. We're not bringing in, a lot of other things. And so depending on how nice the location is, really take a look at that. You want to get, if you can, that's part of why you want to load in from the dock, is you don't have to worry as much of that. It's mostly concrete, but you do want to think about those things as you start to come in. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
All right, we start with TJ Worrell from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Do you give your team a planned 15-minute break when the trucks are empty, more than beverages? We do. The locals often act like this is not the norm.
It depends. Generally, we try to take a break right after we've loaded in. And I think that usually it's a natural break. We usually load in and then we take lunch. usually the cases are there. Where that changes is if there is a tight turn. So if it's a tight turn, but very typically we will definitely try to take a small break to figure out what needs to be done. It lets everyone's mind settle. Usually they've moved a bunch of stuff. And but if we're in a same day load in, oftentimes it'll be 15 minutes is pretty common. But it usually we move pretty quickly to start building, to get that stuff up. But we definitely try to take the breaks as best we can, especially if it's a hard load in. You're absolutely right that giving everybody a little bit of a break makes sense. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, especially if there's multiple trucks to unload. Sometimes some of these shows have 5 40-footers to unload. You get them unloaded and staged. You want to unload the cases, roll them off the trucks, and roll them to where they're going to be used or where they're going to be staged, wherever the stage manager tells you, or the road, the traveling stagehand that outlines and sets up everything on every location. We'll tell you where to place each case, and they're usually numbered and divided by lighting and musical instruments, etc. We roll them to where they're gonna work, and then you can take a break once the trucks are all unloaded. A break.
And oftentimes we break people while we figure out where the cases are going to go, and where the tables are going to go. We need a moment for everyone to walk away and let us do that. And typically, a lot of times ours, it depends on. Again, we try to build it around breaks. Oftentimes, especially if it's a union position, we will try to build it around the union breaks that we already have. So there's there might be a 30-minute break, or it might be a 1-hour walk away, or it might be whatever. And we try to kind of build what we're doing around those so that we just fulfill all the needs that are required. Next question.
From Adrian Watkins in Wellington, New Zealand. Best pack-in advice for a DOP friend. If it doesn't have built-in wheels, then it has to be able to go on something with wheels. Thoughts?
Go to Courtney.
Yes, and there's a lot of custom-made carts designed specifically for camera use. Here's one designed for Steadicam. It's about $575. It's a Magliner, I think, with this second shelf, and it has these attachments that have a spigot arm on it, so you can rest your Steadicam. And a lot of them will have a plate on the end, a flat plate where you can slide the camera on, or mount a second head so that you can put the camera together out in the truck, put it onto the cart, all put together, and then roll it into the location. And you put your lens cases and everything on a cart below that. So they'll have 3 or 4 of these carts that are designed to carry everything they're going to need inside, and anything they don't think they're going to need immediately, they usually leave on the truck because they don't want to haul everything in. They haul in just what they think they're going to need at this particular location, because you don't want to clog up the location with too many cases. that you're probably not going to even open. So leave the cases you don't think you're going to need in the truck. You can always send somebody back to get the case later. But the case, it organizes the case you're going to use on a cart and make sure it can roll from room to room.
Yeah, and if you look at, like, for instance, this is a basic load in on our end, and so you can see this is creative was next to us, but we're down here and across, and the main thing is that actually this is a creative system, but all of us are bringing in our own tables, our own chairs, but you'll notice that for rollers, almost everything has rollers. Like almost everything that we have will have some wheels on it, but we also think about how they go together. So when you first start buying Pelican cases, for instance, you will buy those Pelican cases because this is the right size for this piece of equipment. Over time, you'll buy Pelican cases because they stack well together. And what we learned was that we prefer 1650s. So the Pelican case 1650s are about the right size to be easy to move around, and they have rollers on them. We can get them through hotel rooms, into hotel rooms if we need to. They have wheels on them and they have something to pull out. We flip them on their back. We make sure that we tend to put them on our rollers upside down. And the reason that we do that typically is because they stack better. They won't slide around as much on the cart itself, and they lock better together than right side up. And we use, for our carts, we use a company called Cart Master with a K. These are expensive carts. They're $1,000 each, but they will fold up into almost nothing, and you can check them. So we oftentimes, when we go to another country, we'll literally have 2 or 3 of those Cart Masters that will fold up. You will start with rock and rollers, but after the third one breaks a wheel or comes apart in the middle, you'll move on to Cart Masters. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, those wheels, are those what come with those cases, or do you put those on there? And also, is there a specific size of wheel that you like to have as a minimum?
Yeah, I don't really, I think that a lot of the sizes are pretty standard. I don't really think about it that hard. The Cart Masters are, not Cart Masters. The Pelican cases have their own wheels, and they're built into the case. So I'm not sure exactly what the larger Pelican cases all have wheels on them, and some of the smaller ones do. We don't think that much about it. The casters that are built onto them, I'm sure that there is like a 3-inch diameter or 2.5-inch diameter that's standard because we see them all the time. One of the things that we see with some of the cases when they really build them into trucks is they'll have cavities in the top of the cases where the wheels can go into, so that when you're setting them on top of each other, they kind of lock together. So it just depends on how they're planning to use those cases to make that happen. So the standardization of that, again, I think they're 2.5 or 3 inches, but I've never seen casters on a road case that were a different size, to be honest. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, on anything that weighs about 50 to 75 pounds, you probably want 3-inch casters or 4-inch casters if you're going to go bigger. Because if you have to go over cables or something, or over those, I don't know who invented it, and when I find it, I'm going to throttle that guy. These the ADA prescribed bumpy things that are on every ramp for some reason, that they are those yellow things that have the little, 1/2-inch high bumps, lots of bumps. Every time there's a little ramp to go up and down over a curb, it has all those little bumps. When you get something with a 2-inch caster and you hit those things, you're just stuck. You have to lift it up.
I will
bump it over that stupid thing. I hate those things. I hate those.
I know they are a bit painful. Like, and I was going to show you. Let's see if I can find this really quickly. This is the kind of this is from a. Let's see if I can. So when we're taking pictures of, for instance, this is here's a dock, that we look at. So what I'm looking at here. And these are the photos this is just for one load in. I'm looking at where, how big is the dock? How many, the little things that matter depending on what we're doing is, in this case, I was looking at, can I fit a broadcast truck in here? Is that going to work because I've got all these pillars? But also, as we go through it, I'm looking at what the dock height, this is when we say dock height, this is usually what we're looking at here. And also you want to see if they have these little pieces here, basically, this will go up and down a little bit, and this little wing will flip over onto the truck if it's the right height. So here you can see this is a dock height, right? it may not be perfectly the same dock height, but it can be. And this usually can raise up and down to form a ramp. That's what this is built for, and that's the controller for it. But you're looking for that, like, what is, what's available to us, and then also, what does it take to schedule into this kind of load in. So anyway, those are the kind of pictures we take a lot of when we're getting ready to load into the back of a large facility. Next question.
From Michael Flotron, Portland, Oregon. Sometimes the venue itself isn't the hardest part. Do you have any horror stories loading in and out while in transit, like at a very small airport, for example?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about moving stuff in the past. Smaller airports tend to be a little bit. I have many horror stories about getting equipment in and out of those. The hardest ones are things like in Berlin, the customs is a floor up, and the elevator is very small, and so it's very hard if you have a bunch of cases that need to be approved for carnet. It's the only one I know of where they put the customs on a different floor, and it is super annoying. And I broke my toe dropping one of those cases while trying to get it into that elevator, and it was a great event to be having a broken toe. But I got great pictures from the hospital. Anyway, I got 360 pictures, and a German nurse that thought I was crazy taking pictures while she's working on my toe. That is, the other thing that I do a lot, and a couple of us do, is we take pictures of the carts. So I have lots and lots of cart pictures. And the reason that I have those cart pictures is because I'm looking for, do they have a lip on the front? How long is it? Do I have attachment points? Because it will greatly affect how many cases I can put on the cart. If I'm not, now I slowly moved to just bringing my own cart. Then I don't have to think about it. So I have my own carts, and we know that we can fit them all on our carts. But that's something that we do think about. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you're traveling on airlines or on any commercial transport and you have multiple cases, I always label the cases one of 12, or you put a label on there that says case number 1 of 12, 2 of 12, 3 of 12. So when you get to your location, there's supposed to be 12 cases, you can count them, and if there's one missing, which one's missing. So and then you have your carnet listed by which case number, what's in which case number, and that way you know exactly what's missing when you get there. I've been in situations where you land and we didn't have a carnet, and they suddenly seize, $1.5 million worth of film equipment for customs import duties, and they will not let that equipment go until you pay the import duties, even though it's rental gear and it's going back out of the country in 3 weeks. Oh no, you have to pay the import duties, which they hold on to until you leave the country. So make sure you have a lot of cash on hand when you arrive with a lot of equipment. And if you haven't prearranged to have a carnet to get it into the country and back out of the country without having to pay import and export duties.
Next question.
Vic Hernandez from Springfield, Missouri. Alex, will you tell us about your loading out experience with the Secret Service?
I don't know. I must have talked about one at some point, but I don't know which one I talked about there. The big thing that I would say with loading in and loading out of a lot of a venue like the White House is that there's a lot of security, and you have to have a lot of time. It's going to take you a long time to get in and out, so you're going to show up really early to get in. We have I might have pictures of this, but we have. We grew up to a point where we were bringing trucks in. To do trucks, you really they have to invest. They have to look at it offsite. So there's a location that will actually scan the truck that's not too far away, and then they still have dogs go through it, and then they still inspect it, and then you can pull the truck up and start to load in. Usually, interesting things about high profile locations like the White House is they don't want any logos on your truck. So you can have a U-Haul or something like that, but generally unmarked trucks are what they prefer. They don't want a logo of your company in front of their building, and so those are things to think about as you start to think about through those things. But otherwise, we loading in, loading out has always been, for high security locations, you know that you're going to load in, you're going to build out, and then there's usually a big gap. There's going to be a sweeps, what we call sweeps. And so the sweeps will take oftentimes 2, 3, 4 hours, depending on the size of the location. And sometimes they happen in waves. So like at a convention, like a Democratic or a Republican national convention, both of which we worked on, Secret Service does it in this kind of chaotic wave where they start closing streets down, and so you just have to know when you have to get out. But it's like they're kind of crumpling the security zone until they get to a point where everybody's going through, and they have it all figured out, and they won't tell you anything about it or give you a lot of data because they don't want you to figure out how to get around it, and so they do it a little bit. They make it a little confusing on purpose. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and with Secret Service or any high security stuff, a lot of times they will do dog sweeps with bomb sniffing dogs, and you have to unlock all your cases, and then they clear everybody from the room. Nobody can be in there. Then they come through with the dogs and sweep and open up all the cases and look through all your stuff. And another thing I didn't mention when putting stuff onto an airplane, since Lockerbie, whatever that bomb on the airplane that brought down that huge airliner, you cannot put luggage onto an airplane or a case that you're not flying on unless you're shipping it air freight. So if you've got 4 cases and you get delayed or you get hung up, your cases get there, they can't go on that plane without a ticketed passenger riding inside. If you miss the plane, but you check your luggage and then you get tied up at the bar or something, they will hold that plane and take your luggage off. They will not let that plane leave the gate with luggage on it that doesn't have that person ticketed for that luggage on the plane itself. So bear that in mind, because it can create havoc.
It also can get you back on the plane. I had we had one where there was confusion with. I know it'll sound crazy, but what was it? I think it's called. It's a Brazilian airline or whatever, and it was a United thing, and my brother and I were doing a shoot in Brazil, and we couldn't get. They said, "Oh, your seats aren't on the plane." And I said, "I know my seats are on the plane." I called United. United's like, "I'm looking at the computer. Your seats are on the plane. There's nobody else in those things." And they wouldn't let us on. And I walked over and just told the person, I said, "I need to get on that plane. I have 2 seats on there." And they said, "No, you don't have 2 seats." And I said, "Well, because I talked to United, he said, 'Well, your bags are on the plane.'" And so I walked up and I said, "My seat may not be on the plane, but my bags are on the plane. And I'm going to go talk to that security person right there, and they're going to shut down your plane to get my bags off. If I'm not on the plane, then my bags shouldn't be on the plane." And we were on the plane in 10 minutes. so anyway, I have no idea what happened, but it sorted itself out. Next question.
Rob Collins from Kansas City, Missouri. What special or extra things need to be considered when loading into a field or outdoor event?
Coverage. Like a couple things. Where are you? I've told this story before, but there was one in Las Vegas where I just said, they showed us where we're going to load in. I said, "Well, where's our tent?" And they're like, "Oh, you don't need a tent. It's Las Vegas." And I'm like, "I need a tent. I need a 10 by 10 booth tent. And if I don't have one, I'm not going to load in, or you can, we can tell me if I need to bring one." And we were one of the only people with a tent, and dogs and cats fell out of the water. Water came out of the sky and destroyed. I remember seeing this giant Jijico the water was like flowing out of the mixer. So it was a pretty rough, and our stuff was fine. But so knowing that, also the big thing is a lot of cable runs, and you're going to need sometimes yellow jackets or something you pay a lot of attention to, like, where are people going to walk? Do I need to put, where do I put? Yellow jackets they're the big humps, and they have channels going across them that you can open and close so that cars can roll over them, people can walk over them, so on and so forth. And are you going to be able to use yellow jackets? Do you have to do something that's more flat? Do you have to go over the street? Those are all things that you have to pay attention to as you load in, is to know, what those are going to look like. Also, just know what the surface is going to be like. So if you're outside, are you going to be able to roll, in and out of those things? And where is your power coming from? And what is the quality of that power? Right? We were in Cambodia, in Battambang, and the power at the field that we were building into was not clean. And so then we had to very quickly figure out what that's going to be like. Of course, weather outside, again, that same one in Battambang, it was 118 degrees. And so we couldn't turn the projectors on until 6 because they wouldn't operate at that temperature. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and if you're going to be shooting anywhere where there's sand or loose dirt, bear in mind that even carts with pretty good sized wheels may have difficulty traversing that. So things with bicycle size wheels can traverse that stuff. But if you're shooting at the beach, you better make arrangements for a bunch of gators or something that can travel through sand to move that equipment around. Because if you've got lights that are on wheels or casters, you're not going to be able to move them in the sand. And once sand gets into the casters, it not only ruins them your day for that day, but it ruins them from every day after that because sand gets into the casters and it's very hard to clean all that sand out once it gets into casters. So bear in mind, if you're shooting at the beach, make sure that you have some type of desert dolly, something with large balloon tires that can go across sand to carry a large amount of weight. Otherwise, look for the quads or the gators that can haul your equipment in and out of the location, because your casters and your wheeled carts are probably going to be useless.
Yeah, and definitely looking at what you have to travel over, to get from one place to the other is something that I think a lot of people, miss, as they work through those things, and it's definitely worth checking out. Next question.
Tarlock Lopez Waterman from Brevard, North Carolina. Not all loading docks are equal. What's the number one worst the panel has encountered?
I'm not sure. I think that the biggest problem that we have with loading docks is that often there'll be a handful of them that the dock height is much higher than we expected. And there's only two of them. There's only two things, and all of us are trying to load into it. So I think that docks with a limited number of entry points is pretty painful, because a lot of times a lot of stuff's going in and out. Docks that don't have ramps are painful, because we just, if we have to load something out of a car, I think that's another piece that's a bit problematic for us. I can't think of a specific dock that I didn't like. The ones that are, the ones that keep all the trash in the dock are particularly pungent. So there was one in Denver. I know that every time I went to it, it was just like, you literally just cleared your sinuses. It was so bad. And I don't know how people worked there. Like, it was like, there were people that worked there all day, and it was really horrible. I couldn't imagine your clothes wouldn't smell like it and everything else. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, some docks have these hydraulic levelers that lower the dock down to a different level as your vehicle. But the problem is now it's a foot lower. You have to roll the stuff onto that little elevator and then go up 4 inches or whatever the difference is. So that takes a lot of time, because you got to be sending that little lift dock that's part of the dock up and down. Or if you have a lift gate that's higher than the dock, you can use the lift gate to go down and up. But ramps come in very handy, and I know a lot of grips always carry ramps for the dolly that they can go up the 1 or 2 step up, 1 or 2 steps up and 2 steps down without having. Once you're trying to push that 600-pound dolly, it takes 4 guys to lift it. So you want to have some ramps.
Yeah, and here's a couple of examples. Like I told you, I take a lot of pictures of these. Like, this is a good one. This is a good roller, because it doesn't have a front lip. This is a bad one. like so when you see this is like, when we see this, we're like, oh, this is going to be not good. So that because we can't have anything hang over it. So that really limits what we can do. This is kind of us. This is using, loading, with someone there. This is what I do with my tickets. That's a set. These are all of our Pelican cases. So that, you end up with a large collection. I take pictures of this to remind people of I took a video of this to remind people how people are going to handle our cases, which is mostly they're going to throw them around. Here you can see this is a small kit that we might send out. And of course, this is loading into the airport, but we would load into the venue in the same way. But these are these rock and roll carters. We're strapping these down so that we can get them, so they're not going to be flying around. You can see that they're all flipped upside down. We have what's in each one of them, here. And typically you'll see this little strip here is the weight. We find that if, in places that require weight, if you have if you have weights on all of them, and they'll weigh the first 2 or 3 and see that, they're accurate, and then they don't weigh the rest of them because it's a pain. It takes too much time. Next question.
From TJ Worrell in Minneapolis, what specifically do you look at regarding load in, load out when you're doing your initial on-site survey?
The primary thing we're looking for is Is it a different floor? How do we get to that floor? Are there any bumps? Are we going to have access to the dock? If not, what is the elevator? If I'm doing an early load in, what time is there someone there? And do I need to, and whose phone number is it? Because we've had ones where we got there at 4 a.m. and there was a manager that was supposed to, meet us there. And, we're calling people trying to find that person because it's a hard load in, for a same day event, and losing an hour and a half would be, we did have that phone number and we did get a hold of them and they did show up at 4:30. But otherwise we would have been waiting there till 7:30 in the morning, and that would have thumped the event. So understanding, who's contacted, is it normally opened? Who do I talk to? What are the rules of engagement? Those types of things are all the kind of things that we look for. Elevators, size of elevators. Is the elevator padded or armored? So if it's not, then I have to pay attention to, we might bring some moving blankets that we throw around things, especially in a nice elevator. Whereas if they're going to give us a one of the freight elevators or an armored elevator or a padded elevator, we feel a little bit more comfortable on the load in. Next question.
Chad Lafarge from Columbus, Missouri, and here on the Office Hours Backend crew. How important are and when and how do you deploy witness cams to protect your gear and site?
At some locations, we do it all the time. So a good example is Moscone. Moscone is kind of known for things walking away, or it was when I was doing a lot of work down there. And so we would have 6 to 8 cameras. These are all, and they're all, the way that we cross them, it would be very hard to get to the booth or get to any of the cameras. And they're all a lot of them were kind of hidden as well, but they're all looking at each other as well as the gear. So it'd be very hard to get rid of all of them at the same time. You'd have to be very focused on turning them all off without us seeing you from another camera. So we had a lot of cameras on those things. Another thing that we've started to do is on a lot of gear and a lot of cases, we're dropping air tags. So we have air tags into a lot of things now. So if someone walked away with it, we'd probably know pretty quickly. Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the Office Hours crew. What items might you purchase locally rather than go through the effort and expense of transporting to the venue? What adjustments to production allow for disposable or consumable items that won't need to be recovered after the event?
A lot of times we just look at how much space we have and what the load in is. We did finally get to a point where we found printers that we could pack. We have kind of an office kit that is its own case that we'd open up, and we had little printers. But for a while, we considered printers kind of a disposable thing. We'd buy them when we got there and just leave them behind because it was just another thing we had to ship. But we didn't throw them away. We would just give them to somebody like, hey, do you need a printer? Here's one. So that was, those are the kind of things. We will rent some things, but we do find it to be difficult to rent everything because you just never know where it's been. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, these days, you used to be able to go to a venue and you bring everything that you think you're going to need, but invariably there's something that you didn't get packed or broke or you need a replacement. Back when there were Radio Shacks and Fry's Electronics, where you could send somebody out to Radio Shack to buy up all the adapters, you could do that. But now, you're not going to be able to order them from Amazon and have them delivered on site. Maybe you can if there's some in town. But I usually travel with everything that I know I'm going to need, including tape. Make sure you have gaffer tape, because when you land, people are going, gaffer tape, what is that?
I will freely lend things to other crews with no questions asked as they come through. If I don't think I need that thing, I will never ask for anything. It's one more step towards the front of the bus in the corporate world. Akihabara, by the way, if you're in Tokyo, Akihabara, not big camera, but there's these little underground paths of all the stuff, and you can find anything that you need, including the soldering irons that you would need to put it together. Next question.
Vic Hernandez from Springfield, Missouri. Alex, will you tell us about the loading out while the presidential debate was live?
I'll say this really quickly. In the Romney-Obama debate in Denver, if you do a search, you may find still some videos floating around about it. There were a lot of videos the week of it. There was a loud bang during that debate. And I think it's over 10 years, so I think I can talk about it. But there was a lot of conspiracy theories of someone being shot or some kind of whatever that all popped up on the internet. But it was a 1650 rolling over a metal yellow jacket right at the door where all the power goes into the room. And I might know why. So anyway, you got to be careful about once the event. I will admit I'm very resistant to loading in and out during an event because of that event itself, where I'll just go do something else until the event's done. Like you never know. And you tend to not want to load in and load out during an event because you might trip over a cable or run over a yellow jacket and make a lot of noise. And so I've just decided that I can just wait. Next question.
From Talak Lopez Waterman, Brevard, North Carolina. I wish all trucks had E-Track and logistics bars. What is your favorite logistics company for the entertainment industry? What other must-haves do you have for trucks and trucking?
Yeah, this is. I think this is us prepping for. This is it says do not tip, and it's upside down. I think that's why we took a picture of it. But typically, this is. We use a Rocket for most of the stuff that we send, and they manage all of the. They manage all the shipping for us. It's a little more expensive, but it always shows up on time anywhere in the world. When you're talking about E-Track, this is my old truck that we used for this, and I really miss this truck. This is a Ford Transit that's at the full height and full length, and this is E-Track here. And so this is all of our E-Track. And what you do is as you start to do this, you build your cases out and you latch it at each level. And the reason you do that is because otherwise it's dangerous. Like you want to pull it all together and at each round of those and cinch them all to the thing. And the E-Track lets you just slide something in. You're not trying to wrap around things. You just snap it into the E-Track. And you tug it tight, and you keep on doing that layer by layer by layer. Otherwise, things can get out. They'll all start going one direction, or they'll go another direction, forward and back, and you'll flip your truck. And we've seen people do it. Next question.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana. Should you be AC electricity free during load in, load out, batteries only, or is electricity okay to use if planned for?
Yeah, I think that usually what I do is I load all the hard stuff in and then we start setting everything up and we lay everything out. And I usually wire everything without power and then we power everything up slowly. We do it kind of in layers, in that area. I don't think I do it to protect anything other than it's the order in which we tend to build. Go ahead, Courtney.
I always carry one of those plug-in testers that, a 3-prong tester you can just plug into any normal US socket out there, and you can get them for European sockets as well. And it gives you the 3 LEDs that tell you if you've got your hot and neutral wired correctly and if the ground is good. And it'll also has a button on it to test if you've got ground fault interrupter built in. Always carry one of those because you'd be amazed at the number of old houses or something you go to and they've wired it up themselves and the hot and the neutral are reversed and you're going to blow equipment up. If you plug one in, something into one outlet here and another outlet there, and they touch the cases together, you can electrocute people or fry things. So I always carry one of those, and a voltmeter is another nice thing to have to check the voltage before you plug anything in, because who knows, they may be on some strange 220 voltage with wired to the wrong connectors, which happens.
Next question.
TJ Worrell from Minneapolis is back. Do you have a formula for the number of hands in a given department based on show size? Most of the events I'm involved with are smaller than 2,000 attendees. I'm not sure how to scale for a larger event. I realize, here's an office hours Mickeyism, it depends.
Yeah, I don't think it's a function of how many people are in the event as into what needs to get done for the event. So we build everything based on the needs. So do we need an A1? Do we need an A2? How many A2s do we need? Do we need coordinators? But we back up and we try to design the entire event. And then as we think through that entire event of all the things that are necessary, we then back into, well, I'm going to need one of these, this, and how many days. So we may have, I may decide that I need a lead camera for 4 days, but the rest of the camera operators for 2 days. And all that adds up to money. So we really think about who needs to be there. The one thing that I definitely throw at problems are PAs and utilities. I find it amazing that people will, the first thing they'll cut is their PAs, and they're like the least expensive labor part, and it's like the oil that runs the whole system. And so the thing is that PAs magnify everybody's time, because otherwise you have your A1 running around for coffee, or you have your A1 doing something that they shouldn't be, that they, paying them a lot of money to do something. And so I never go into an event without at least a couple PAs, or at least one, like that's going to do stuff, because you just find yourself doing things, and people that are really expensive that cost a lot per hour doing things that a PA could do. So that's not the place that we cut. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is asking, how do you manage cable conduit routing if your show requires supplemental power and or cooling? Do you load those elements in first?
We usually do them last. Like usually all of our hardware is down before we lay out the power, because the power and signal usually has to go around the cases, and start laying them out ahead of time. Now, having large runs, especially if you're asking something from the venue, then you're going to request those and hope that they're there when you get there. Oftentimes we've spent an hour or two waiting for the power, but that's also why we bring our signal and our cases, we load in and we start signaling everything up. And the reason that power comes last, as I mentioned before, is oftentimes we're waiting for power from the venue. There's a bunch of people and they're running a bunch of power around. And so that's the last thing we worry about. We're self-contained until we need power. Next question.
From Tulak Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina. Advancing a show is vital. Paperwork and a plan can make or break you. What checklist items do you have for advancing a show to ensure smooth load in and load out?
I mean, the big thing is, really knowing who the points of contact are, what their phone number or texts or emails are, how they'd prefer to do it, schedules of when your load in is, an agreed schedule with the venue and with your event partner and everything else. If you're in a loading dock, but all that stuff should be something that you send out as a PDF, but that you always print. And the reason you always print it is if you run out of batteries, suddenly you don't have anything. Not that that's ever happened to me. And so I print all those things out. I make sure that I have them all. And then the other things that we print out are, where is our location? Exactly where is our location? Like, where is the square that we are going into? Not like that we're in the loading dock. What dock number? Where are we going? How are we doing that? If we're loading into a room, exactly where in that room are we loading into? And we want to know what that is. We want a layout of everything. So here's where all the tables are going to go. Here's where all the things are going to go. Usually we have a wiring diagram. Those are the kind of things and generally all of those are both electronically and printed for the folks that are using it. Go ahead, Courtney.
And a neat thing to have if you've got a traveling show that's on a 40-foot semi or something, or even if it's just a panel truck, is to get your whiteboard, set it vertically, and print out a list of all the cases that are on that truck, that go on that truck, and then 2 columns on the truck and in the venue. And every time you pull something off the truck, you erase the on the truck and put a little check mark in the venue. And that way you can look at that whiteboard coming in or going out of the truck, and whether that case is on the truck or has been taken in. And that way you've got every case back on the truck before it departs. If all the check marks are on the truck, what cases have been left back in the venue. So a centrally located whiteboard that anybody can look at. If you can do that with a printed out schedule, but then that's got to be on somebody's clipboard somewhere, and somebody's got to be responsible for it. But if you put it on a whiteboard on the inside, just inside the truck or in the door of the truck, then anybody who takes anything off the truck can update the list, and everybody else knows about it when they go to the truck.
And I think that things like AirTags or some industrial version of those is going to keep on revolutionizing what we're doing here, where we know where everything is. We just know where the cases are. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is asking, I remember seeing a video of a concert on a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier. Wouldn't load in, load out, and power supply be challenging on a warship?
100%. Like that takes a lot of coordination and planning. Go ahead, Courtney.
I did a commercial shoot on a launch ship. I had to bring in lots of computers and screens and big screens and things. And it's parked dockside. It's a destroyer size ship. But everything has to go on and off by crane. So you can't load it up a gangplank or anything. Nope. the crane, you have to load it onto a pallet. The crane has to lift it up to the deck, and then you got to take it off the pallet on the deck and it comes down for another one. So it takes a long time to load onto a ship a lot of times because everything has to come in and off, on and off with cranes. And bear in mind, they're steel, and you can't just, find a little hole somewhere to run some cables because they're usually watertight doors. And a lot of times they want to close those doors. So you can't run cables through the watertight doors. It's very problematic shooting on a ship, especially one that has, a submarine or anything with watertight doors on it.
Yeah. Next question.
From Tarlock Lopez Waterman from Brevard, North Carolina. What do you use for power distribution? Do you tie into a 300 amp company switch or use the venue's distribution?
The vast majority of the time, we end up with the company. Wherever we're at and a venue is going to have the power distribution for us, and they're going to deliver it to us. But we do have those conversations, especially if it's a high-profile event. We're oftentimes bringing generators in for our space. If they're not providing them, we're providing them. We want to have shore power as well as generator power, and that's a pretty common thing, especially as our productions get bigger. For our smaller productions, UPSs are something that are a must. But again, a lot of times the smaller ones, we're really dealing with Edison from the venue, whereas and that might be delivered by them or it might be in the walls. But for the larger events, we're usually trying to find out what. We're hoping that they're going to have two sets of power, two independent power. Large convention centers are going to be able to give you that. But then otherwise we're bringing in our own generators that might be small or as big as, I think the largest ones we've had is a couple container-sized CAT generators to run, broadcast trucks and stuff like that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, do you ever collect a deposit from the client to ensure that the client-provided loaders are available for both load-in and load-out?
I avoid other people loading my gear as much as possible. So usually now I will hire utilities sometimes, depending on the complexity of it. I'll put part of the production is hiring 4 people for the beginning and end, or 6 people or whatever it is, to bring in and set up for the first couple hours, and then they take most of the day off and come back in the afternoon or whatever. So hiring people, we still do occasionally need to use our crew to load in and out. For the larger events that I work on, we try to avoid having even the crew do much of the load in, load out. We slow, but it depends on the budget, of course. Go ahead, Courtney.
And if it's a union venue, you need to look ahead to see what local has control of that venue, and request the number of stagehands that you're going to need to pick up from that local, and make sure they're going to be there for the load in and the load out. And be careful, because if it's a single day load in, load out, if you keep those guys on the clock from load in to load out, the same guys, you're going to be paying a lot of overtime. So bear that in mind when you're picking up local stagehands at each individual venue. Depends on.
It's actually one of the things. It's a real convenience of the union is that if it's all shared, a lot of times you walk into a convention center, you're booking time. I need 2 hours of time to get things in and out. You're not paying for someone for the whole day. You get a group of Teamsters or a group of Local 16 or whatever for that window of time, and then they go do something else because they're connected to the overall production, not to you specifically. So a lot of times if you work that out, it can be to your advantage. All right. Well, that's good. It's good. I wasn't sure. At first I was like, I don't know. I go into these ones like the gaff tape one and like this one. I was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to talk for an hour about this, but we did. Great questions from the producers. Thank you so much for guiding this conversation and making sure that you extracted what you needed from us. Thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. And appreciate your contribution to everyone here. Also, if you're interested in being a panelist, go ahead and reach out to Josh or me, and we're kind of growing the panel group. So let us know about that. And thank you to the incredible team on the back end, the development team that's making the software better every single week. Obviously the management teams that are making sure we have second hours, making sure that we have people here, there, and everywhere. That's incredible work there, as well as the team that's actually cutting this show every day. We really appreciate all of your contribution. We traveled 85,000 miles, 138,000 kilometers, and that is 680 million bananas for scale. All right, let's jump into After Hours.
did it take you to load in all those bananas?
So many bananas. It's like truckloads and truckloads of bananas. Be 3.5 times around the earth of bananas. I don't know how many. I think we should figure out. I wonder how many bananas are in a given truckload.
Which pelican case would you choose?
I still stick with 1650s, just a lot of them, because they'll stack really nicely.
You can't get them in banana yellow.
Banana yellow banana. Oh my gosh. No, everyone would know that they were your pelican cases because, ew, that would be gross.